And now we'll read the scripture readings that will be up on the wall screen. The first one is from John 13, 34 and 35, continuing in this theme. A new command I give to you, love one another. As I have loved you, so must you love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. And then in Matthew 11, 28, 29 and 30, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." So today I wanted to follow up on last week's service, which was about grace, and continue on this sort of these big themes within our religion. And this theme today that I'm exploring is unity consciousness, and it's a huge theme. What I'll be talking about here is just sort of skimming the subject, but I hope you get some ideas that inspire you and that make you question and have conversations. Unity consciousness has been a very active theme in my life. As a sick kid, I was a sick kid. I spent lots of time in Toronto sick kids when I was little. And I had what I now understand to be, I experienced many different altered states of consciousness, including spiritual experiences, including out-of-body experiences, and one experience that definitely would be categorized today in the near-death experiences. And it changed me. This all was before I was 5 or 6 years old. And it affected me in a certain way, and it confused me as I was growing up that other people didn't see things the same way I did. And as I got older, I really was curious about consciousness. And when I went to the University of Waterloo, all of the electives that I took were either in psychology or in religious studies, so that I could learn about consciousness through that. And that did help. So before we get to unity consciousness, let's just talk about consciousness for a moment and what that is. Consciousness, if you look it up in the dictionary, will be defined as awareness, being aware of where you are, who you are. Consciousness is awareness, but we normally experience 3 types of consciousness. Everybody experiences these types of consciousness that are alive, and they are deep sleep, dreaming, and wakefulness. Those are the 3 states. However, now we know, and we have evidenced scientifically, that there are higher states of consciousness. They're currently being studied, and what's fascinating is that you can look at the brain patterns and the brain frequencies through EEGs, encephalograms, and things, and you can know what that person is experiencing by the type of brainwave that they are generating. So, I don't know if you want to come up a little bit closer so you can see what I've written here, or if this is easier to see, because I don't know if black and white are easier to see than the green printed. But scientists have been exploring for 50 years these basic states of consciousness. So in the delta state, which goes from 0 to 4 hertz, or I guess just a little beyond 0, otherwise we wouldn't be conscious, we're in deep sleep. That is also the state that babies are often in, awake or asleep. They are in this very open state. In theta state, the cycles are 4 to 8 hertz. That's theta state. And that is a state that is identified with higher spiritual awakening and spiritual consciousness. And what's interesting is that young children up to the age of 7 are primarily in this theta state, an extremely open state, which is why it's a good idea to protect children from a lot of commotion. And if there is a lot of commotion around, why it's a good thing for a mother or a loving caregiver to always be around children, to soothe them and to settle them and to sort of wash them with love. The alpha state is the 8 to 13 hertz, and that's a relaxed or daydreaming state. Sometimes we fall into that when we're in church. We start to think about things, we get very relaxed, we daydream. But that is the daydreaming state. And then the beta state, that's very awake. You're very engaged with whatever you're doing. And the beta state is absolutely necessary, but it can also be a state that is identified with worry and with overthinking. If it gets higher, it can get a little, it can be where your thoughts are controlling you, as opposed to you allowing your thoughts to serve you, let's put it that way. And then finally, the gamma state is being researched, and that state would be from 25 to 100 hertz, but normally people would experience it around 40. And that is the state that some scientists are saying is the brainwave state of transcendence. All I know is that I've seen a lot of pictures of brainwaves and brain states. And I saw a picture of a man in deep transcendental meditation. And what was very cool was that the brainwaves front to back and side to side harmonized in this extraordinary wave. And it's a state of meditation, it can be a deep state of transformation, actually. So that's what we know about consciousness from a very physical aspect. And what we know is that if we change our brainwaves, and we can through biofeedback, through breathing techniques, if we change our brainwaves, we change our bodies. And I think that's exciting. A lot of studies have shown that our bodies regenerate and renew at a beautiful pace. But, so if that's consciousness, what is unity consciousness? What is that? And the truth is that there are many definitions. The oldest being 6,000 years old, coming from the Vedantas, which predated Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, Christianity, and of course anything since. But that definition, that's 6,000 years old, and the definition that is used today in religious circles, it still points to the same thing, and that's oneness, monism. Unity consciousness is a state of oneness. I asked Dr. Cam Ewan what his definition of unity consciousness is, and he said, in unity consciousness, there are no issues. There's no dysfunction, there's no disharmony, there's peace and there's harmony in unity consciousness. But I'm going to go ultimately with the definition that I was taught at U of W, and that definition is that unity consciousness is heaven. It is the state of heaven. That separate consciousness is sin. So that's why we're all born into sin. We come from oneness. We're born into a separate body, and then we go back into oneness when we die. Our consciousness lives on and on, but we are born into this separate being, and then we come back. And the danger is, as we are taught in Christianity, the danger is that we start to think of each other as being separate, forgetting that we are unified, forgetting that we are one. We are God's creations. We are all one in that. We share information and energy. We're in an enclosed system on the planet. We are very unified. And it's a good practice to remember that we are unified. And before I go any further, I just want to say that I talked to Terry Hastings about this. I asked him what he thought of these definitions, unity consciousness being a heavenly state and separate consciousness being sin or being in a hellish state. And he said he thought they were very sound definitions, very, very good definitions. And for those that might not know, Terry Hastings was our minister here before Rob Congram started here. Well, I have discovered that not only are these definitions sound, but right now they're very useful in a particular way in this moment in time. They're useful because they are describing God and sin in complete agreement with current science. I think that's amazing that we are at a place in our history where science is agreeing that our source is conscious. Our source is conscious. After a century of exploration of the nature of our universe and the discovery of things like relativity, wave formation, and most recently the Higgs boson, a mechanism that is everywhere in existence in space and time, and it creates form. But of course, we can't find our creator in space and time. Our creator created space and time. So God, we call God, is consciousness, creating everything. Does that make sense at all? Do you follow that? Okay. So, we are all products of creation, and that unifies us energetically. We are all made of the same stuff. God, consciousness, is our divine source, the creator. And this definition of God as consciousness neatly bridges science with religion traditions. I want to share with you two quotes from the famous Nobel Prize-winning for physics recipients, Max Planck, who's the founder of the Planck Institute, and Erwin Schrödinger, who came up with the wave theory. And Max says, behind this force, creation, we must assume the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. And Erwin Schrödinger said, consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms, for consciousness is absolutely fundamental. So the experience of unity consciousness is the experience of oneness. It is an experience that is blissful. It is an experience of connection with God. And it is something, is a sigh of relief to me, that science is illustrating how we can achieve states of unity consciousness through brainwave technology and various focusing practices. But the beautiful truth is that 2,000 years ago, Jesus taught us all how to access unity consciousness. He first taught us that we are all one. We are all brothers and sisters in Christ. We are all unified in God. And he taught us how to enter the kingdom of heaven. Before we go any further, you might be asking yourself, well, what kind of consciousness did Jesus have? And what you would be told in religious theory, I suppose, is that Jesus was enlightened. He was an enlightened being. He was, and this enlightenment was a fully permanent state. His consciousness today is referred to as Christ consciousness. It is a permanent, illuminated state where Jesus walks equally in the world of the energetic and the world of the physical. We think in our separateness that what is physical is real. But the truth is, it's just the icing on the cake. What is physical is a very tiny percentage of our reality, which is filled with all kinds of waves of information and particles of information, of energy and information. Christ consciousness is the actualization of unity consciousness. That results in the ability to perform miracles. It results in the ability to see the truth behind appearances. Some people in our world glimpse levels of enlightenment, but Jesus truly lived it. I've written out 5 things that Jesus taught that can guide us or usher us in to this state of unity consciousness, this relationship that we talked about last week, what we called grace. And outside of those things that we talked about last week, which were giving thanks, celebrating, Jesus taught us that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's right here. It's right now, in this very present. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. He taught us that we must become like children to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, a lot of ministers have said a lot of things about that particular teaching. We must become like children to enter the kingdom of heaven. But as we see, children live in a state of consciousness that accesses spirituality. It accesses unity consciousness. They're already aligned with God, just by being children. And we as adults can practice coming in to that consciousness through the practice of stillness. Jesus taught us the golden rule, which is a powerful bridge to unity consciousness. Unity consciousness unifies men, women, children, seniors, east, west. Unity consciousness unifies. God taught us, Jesus taught us, to follow his ways because his yoke is easy and his burden is light. Like a bridge, a yoke unifies. And in the case of Jesus' teachings, what is unified is body, mind, and spirit. And I can testify that people experiencing unity consciousness emit light. We have photographs of people in meditation state. There's light around them. It's undeniable. But for me, most importantly and most originally, Jesus taught us the Lord's Prayer. This prayer is the perfect recipe for unity consciousness, I am here to say. It starts with faith and praise. It moves through unifying and surrender, activation and service, abundance, and forgiveness. Forgiveness is such a powerful unifying act. And forgiveness does not mean we condone something. It means we simply let go of a lot of emotions. We don't wear it. We let go. And finally, the Lord's Prayer bridges our highest consciousness, facilitating greater unity, inner guidance, growth, and overcoming obstacles or success. 2 years ago, I shared with this congregation how the Chartres Labyrinth is considered to be a meditation tool for the Lord's Prayer. My journey started with this book, Kathleen McGowan's The Source of Miracles. I highly recommend it. It's all about the Lord's Prayer and the history of how the Lord's Prayer came into France. But what I have discovered since that journey, which is now several years old, is that this method that was taught in Chartres originally and taught by Kathleen in this book, this method actually does change our physicality and brain structure. It absolutely prepares our bodies and brains for the ability to hold consciousness, just as, if not more powerfully, than current medical and scientific methods. I love that. I love that there's been no secret here. For the last 2,000 years, we've had the Lord's Prayer, and if we understand it, it will strengthen us and unify us. My conclusion is this: unity consciousness is facilitated through bridges. Bridges that create harmony, such as kindness, and bridges that create personal development, such as stillness and prayer. As Christians, we're taught to serve others, and one way we can do that is to continually create bridges where previously there has been separation. One of my heroes is this woman. Her name is Janka Bilak. And this is a medal, it was a medal that has her image engraved on it. She's Polish, and she is a survivor of World War II. You can all have a look at this, I'll set it up here. She was a survivor of World War II, and her father was murdered by the Russians, her siblings were, and other relatives, mother, aunts, and uncles, all were killed. She lived in a concentration camp and really had horrendous experiences. And yet, she came out of that, and years later, she created and was a huge force in the Tall Ships Association. Has anybody ever seen the Tall Ships in any of the ports or have heard about them? The motto of the Tall Ships Association is, "The sea is our bridge." I loved that. The sea is our bridge. We are all joined, if only through water. And what she had to do in order to facilitate this was she first had to forgive the Russians who had perpetrated the worst horrors on her and her family. In that act of forgiveness, she was able to move on and facilitate better communication, better relationships, and as a result, won this order in Poland, which is equivalent to the Order of Canada. and she was the first woman to ever receive it. And that was not long ago. And how I came to know her was through Alex Vila, who was the best man at our wedding. And Bianca has been here. She spent some Christmases here. She's a rather amazing woman. Anyway, may we all build bridges with each other. May we always remember that Jesus is our bridge to God. And may we practice our stillness that strengthens our personal bridge. Join now together in hymn 64, Be Still and Know That I Am God.